Hello, welcome to our live OnePlus Nord review. Me, James Peckham from TechRadar, and John McCann, who you can see on the screen right now, deputy editor for TechRadar, we're both here to talk about the OnePlus Nord, which you've been trying out, John, for the last few weeks. So we are live on Facebook and YouTube at the moment, and if you've got any questions about the OnePlus Nord or about our review in general, feel free to drop your comments in there, and we'll get to them later on in the video. We're going to talk through a load of the specs and a load of our opinions of the phone so far and where it stands in 2020 in the next probably half an hour or so. We also have our video producer in the chat there for gathering all the questions up together, so we're going to have them all to look at the very end. If you're watching this on demand afterwards, then you've missed out and you won't be able to ask any questions, but be sure to put them in the chat and we may be able to get to them later on along the line as well. And please also consider subscribing to our YouTube and our Facebook so you don't miss the next stream and you'll get a notification for that. You may have had that already though if you're here. So right, now we've got all that boring stuff out of the way, John. Let's talk OnePlus Nord.
Let's do it, James.
What would you like to know? Can you just talk a little bit to start with about where this phone stands? This is a bit of a strange one for OnePlus, right?
Yeah, well, it's almost OnePlus is going back to its roots, although it was very adamant in the build-up that that's exactly not what it's doing, and it just harmonizes nicely with the rest of its range. But yeah, basically, when OnePlus first burst onto the scene in 2014, it had the OnePlus One. It was billed as a flagship killer, and it was going to take on the big names and bring a flagship experience at a much, much lower price tag. And to a certain extent, it did achieve it. It did make a splash. It did make some waves. It got us interested in the brand. And since then, the OnePlus prices have slowly crept up year on year. And the past couple of years, OnePlus 7, 7T, and now the 8 series, we're looking at flagship price tags for OnePlus phones, which is not necessarily a bad thing. They're very good phones. And to an extent, they do justify those price tags. But OnePlus has always been a very sort of community and fan-driven brand. It has a good following behind it. And those who got on board with the brand early got on board because it was an affordable price point with great tech. And in recent years, it has moved away from that. So the OnePlus Nord is actually great news if you are an original OG OnePlus fan, because you're getting that affordable SKU back again. And you know what? The OnePlus Nord does a pretty good job of being an affordable handset.
So yeah, let's start with design then. Let's if you can show it to the camera as well, that'd be amazing. But
the low quality camera on my laptop, enjoy this, but lovely blue marble effect here.
I think people worry when it's a mid-range or an affordable phone that the design is going to feel cheap. Have you found so far that it feels like a cheaper affordable phone?
OnePlus has made a big deal about the OnePlus quality and it feeling like a flagship phone and it being a flagship phone at a lower price. And, while that's not true throughout the whole of the phone, the design is one area where actually, it does look and feel like a properly good premium phone. I've got the OnePlus 8 Pro here as well. And side by side, yes, there's an obvious size difference, but you wouldn't say that one looks cheaper than the other when you see them in the flesh and you pick them up and you spin them around in your hand. You're like, okay, yeah, these are two well-made phones. There are a couple of hints, though, on the Nord that it isn't quite the same tier as the 8 series. On the front, the screen, it's flat and it doesn't curve around the edges as it does on the 8 series, a more premium feature, slightly more expensive to make and produce. So it's flat, which means that while it has curved edges on the back, it doesn't have curved edges on the rear. So it does just feel a bit chunkier in your hand just because of that aesthetic difference. There is also a slender plastic rim that runs around the outside of the screen between the Gorilla Glass 5 and the metal frame of the phone. If you run your finger over it, it's noticeable. It does catch your finger. It's not like the smooth edges of the more premium phones. And it is that just slight little hint that, dings a little node in your brain that goes, this is a small feature. But I am nitpicking here. They're minor things. Another slight annoyance personally for me from a purely aesthetic viewpoint is the factory fitted screen protector, which is great. Don't get me wrong, especially for those who like to sling their phone in a bag or in a pocket with keys. Having that protection already there, it is noticeable though. It's another noticeable ridge around the screen and around that dual camera cutout on the front. You can easily remove it, but you do so at your own risk. However, you do get a case in the box with it as well. It's relatively see-through. It allows you to still show off the design, but it does give you rear protection, obviously, but it does bulge out on the corners. So if you were to place the phone face down on a surface, the screen wouldn't be sitting directly on it. So there is a bit of protection built in. And if you'd rather a cleaner looking screen experience, you can just peel that off, but you do so at your own risk. But overall, design, it's very nice. For those with larger hands, it's easy to use one-handed. If you've got smaller hands, you might really struggle to reach the top of the screen with your thumb. So you might want to employ your second hand there, but it is overall quite nice. There is no headphone jack for anyone hoping on that. That ship has sailed, I think. OnePlus fans. The only port you do get is a USB-C on the bottom, obviously for charging or connecting to a computer or anything else. There is a dual SIM tray and there's a speaker as well, but that's about it. Apart from, you've got volume on one side, you've got power below the alert slider on the right.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about the screen then. So it's a 6.44-inch screen. That sounds like a large phone, really, on paper. Are you finding that the screen is still a good quality considering the price of the phone?
Yes, it's an AMOLED display, OLED display. You know, AMOLED, is it a real thing or not? It's just marketing speed, but it's an OLED display, which means it's colorful, it's bright. There's a there's not 40, 90 hertz refresh rate on there, which means that if you scroll through Twitter or Instagram, the whole movement is really nice and smooth. Most phones, especially if you're upgrading from 1, 2, or 3 years old now, your phone is probably running at about 60 hertz. And well, you know, for me, for you, for everyone, you know, 60 hertz is fine. It's not an issue, but if you were to put it side by side with the Nord or any phone, you know, 90 hertz is becoming more common now. OnePlus certainly isn't alone there, and we've even seen 120 hertz on some displays. But 90 hertz, as you scroll around, as you move around the interface, everything just feels just a tad more fluid, smoother, less juddery. And while these are all minor points, it makes for an experience which just feels a little bit more premium, a little bit more slick under finger. So the screen is very good. It's full HD plus, so you're looking 1080p. We're not looking at the sort of 2K QHD screens again you see on the top tier. This is, remember, an affordable smartphone, so don't expect craziness there. There is support for HDR10, so if you're watching Netflix and there's HDR support on your particular video content, then you get that as well, which really enhances what's going on the screen. Also, there's enough space there when it comes to gaming. Enough you find. I've been playing PUBG on it. You know, there's more than enough brightness and resolution and HDR and smooth graphics there to keep me interested. Although I'm saying HDR, I couldn't turn on HDR or 4K mode in the settings. It's just not available on this phone at the moment. You can get up to HD graphics, but everything worked nicely.
Brilliant. And we've seen full HD resolution on flagship phones within 2019 and 2020. So, like, this is a phone that's going to be half the price of that. So, yeah, that's not a breaking feature of that, is it? Let's move on to camera. So, there are lots of cameras, the most cameras that we've ever seen on a OnePlus phone, if I'm correct.
Oh, yes.
Can you run us through how you've experienced, like how it's been when you've been using them, and what exactly you're going to get with this as well?
Cool. So you've got 4 on the front. No. You've got 4 on the back and 2 on the front. Getting my front and my back mixed up. Very easy to do. So around the back, the main sensor is a 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor. Now that's the same flagship camera that you'll find on the OnePlus 8. So that's a nice feature that OnePlus has tiered down to the Nord, so you're getting a main decent quality camera straight up, and, you know, take it out and about, fire up the camera app, snap away. If it's good quality light outside, you're going to get decent images out of it. They're maybe not quite as colorful as some handsets. Samsung is a great example where they really sort of, when it comes to the image processing side, really bump up the colors for a sort of zestier image that catches the eye. And while the Nord doesn't have that sort of instant allure, it is technically closer to reality. And of course, you can always dive into an editor to zhuzh it up a bit. That 48 megapixel sensor is actually default set to take 12 megapixel cameras when you first fire open the app. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, a 48 megapixel image is about 3 times the file size of a 12 megapixel image. So if you're taking lots of photos and all 48 meg, you're going to start using up that storage quite a lot. And secondly, 12 megapixels actually, for most uses, especially if you're looking to post to social where image quality is generally downgraded as you upload, there's no need for 48 megapixels there. It just makes your upload quicker. It means you'll be using less data when you're uploading it. So it's an easy toggle though in the app. At the top, just tap where it says 12M, give you an option to to switch to 48 and vice versa. You've then got 3 other sensors on the rear. There's a 8 megapixel wide angle camera, the ultra wide, 119 degrees field of view, which gives you a nice wide shot. So if you've got a nice sweeping landscape in front of you, you can tap on that to get more into the picture. OnePlus has said it's worked really hard on reducing the amount of distortion around the edge of these wide images. A lot of ultra wide cameras on phones can end up giving you sort of a fisheye effect, where the edges of the images are a little bit more stretched than the sort of in focus middle. And while improvements have been made, it's not perfect. If you look, you can still see that sort of bit of distortion, but it's not as bad as some phones. OnePlus saying it's better than the iPhone 11. Yeah, it's on par maybe, but it is still a very good camera. You've got a macro camera, which seems maybe a slightly excessive addition, 2 megapixels, so it's not crazy high resolution. It just means you can get extra close up to, in my case, my Lego models and get a cheeky face of the car driver that I have on my desk, because, that's what I do. But some people may find it useful. It's not something that we particularly went to that often, really. And if you're being pessimistic, you'd say, they've just added it so they could say they've got 6 rather than 5 cameras. And the final sensor is a depth sensor, 5 megapixel, and that's used in the portrait mode, that background blur effect. And that does work nicely. The Nord does a good job of recognizing the foreground with the background, although with this lockdown hairstyle, sometimes the extra curly edges can get a little bit confused just defining those. But if you've got a much neater hairstyle, then it'll probably be just fine. Around the front, you've got 32 megapixel main camera for your selfies. Oh, exactly. And that again produces nice, bright, clear, image-rich selfies for all your social needs. There is an ultra wide option on the front, which is that second camera at 8 megapixels. Not as wide field of view as the rear, 105 degrees this time, but it means you can get more of your buddies in, or your family, or your pets, or whoever else you want to jump into the selfie with. Or if you're at somewhere nice, which isn't your house because you're in lockdown, and you want to get the background in with you, you can. The shots with the ultra wide camera on the front and the back, they aren't as good quality, lower megapixels. They also come out a touch darker and a little muddier. So in terms of quality, you're much better off using the main cameras on the front and the back. The ultra wide is only really there if you really want to stretch your ambition.
Would before we move on to battery life in a moment, you've used the OnePlus 8 Pro, would you say it's comparable to that, or are we talking, is this a much lower level quality camera?
I'd say there's not a huge difference. I'd say the 8 Pro probably still just edges it. It's got a higher chipset, Snapdragon 865 in the Pro, which comes with a better ISP image processing, so it can do a bit more with each image that it captures. But you compare this to sort of the other mid-range sort of rivals: LG Velvet, Motorola Edge, iPhone SE, Google Pixel 3a, 3a XL from last year. It's in or about there. There's also Nightscape, which is their own night mode, which can do a good job depending on how dark it is. I went out for a couple of late night walks when it was pitch black till about 11 o'clock at night. In areas where there is some light, a couple of street lights, then actually Nightscape does a really good job of harnessing the light that it can and improving the overall image. However, in really dark areas where there's much less sort of light for it to grab onto, it struggles a bit more. And by struggle, I'm comparing it to the Google's Pixel night sight feature, which can seemingly pull light when there isn't any and do it. So it's not that level of night photography, but again, let's consider the price. Let's consider where it sits in the market. It's nice to see a decent night mode, and you can see some of my example night shots between it being off and on in my review on the site.
Brilliant. So let's move on to battery life. That's going to be a major thing for a lot of people, and something that OnePlus has generally been quite good on in the last few generations of its handsets. Again, you've been in lockdown, so you've probably not been testing the battery as much as you normally would be with commuting and doing all that kind of thing.
Don't worry, I have taken plenty of time during the workday to not do any work and play games and stream hours of music and watch videos. So
good work.
While I may not be doing my 3-hour round commute each day, I am making sure that it was thoroughly tested. You get a decent sized battery, 4,119, 15. It's something
15,
like that. There we are. There you go. But 4100 basically milliamp battery, which is, par for the course at this range, and it will last you a day. Don't expect more than that. This is a phone you will have to charge each night, which isn't a big deal. But obviously, we'd always like a bit more. But the Nord isn't going to give you 2-day battery life. It's probably not going to even give you 1.5-day battery life. There isn't wireless charging as well. So anyone who just likes the convenience of popping the handset down on a pad, leaving it and coming back to it, that's not an option. Again, not a huge issue at the mid-range at this price point for now. But considering the OnePlus 8 series does have wireless charging, there's a small reason that maybe you'd spend more on the bigger handsets there. You do get fast charging. OnePlus's Warp 30T that gives you 0 to 70% in about half an hour. That does work. You have to use the block in the box, and you get a cable as well, but you can use any USB-C cable. But yeah, that charges it up to sweet. So if you are about to go out on a night out, or you're about to, I don't know, get on a plane or something, giving it a quick blast for half an hour will basically see you through.
A nice added element there is that the charger's in the box as well. A lot of phones that you buy at the moment, including the iPhone, doesn't always come with a fast charger included in the box. So that's a nice little element of it. Cool. Let's move on to performance and software. Obviously, being a mid-range phone, we're not expecting the top end performance here. And you said you've been playing PUBG on this phone. How have you found it in day-to-day use?
Yeah, there's no obvious performance issues with this phone, whether it's PUBG, or I've got 6 different social networks open, or I'm snapping loads of photos, or anything you can pretty much throw at it. It will handle pretty comfortably. It uses Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G chipset, which is the firm's sort of mid to high end chipset, which sits between its 600 series and its 800 series, and that's in that middle ground between the mid and the high market. So it does very well there. Day-to-day usage, you're not going to be like, oh, this is slow. If you sat down and really drilled into it with phones which had higher chipsets, and those would be faster than this, but nobody really does that in day-to-day usage. So there's more than enough here. It will run your games, you can do your photos, it will run apps, load times are pretty good. Again, that 90 hertz screen just makes everything feel just a little bit more fluid under finger. There's plenty of RAM as well. So the standard model comes with 8 gig of RAM with 128 gigabytes of storage, but you can pay a little bit more and you can get 12 gig of RAM with 256 gigabytes storage, which is 12 gig of RAM in a phone is a bit excessive. But if you really are into your gaming, there's a fanatic mode for gamers as well, which turns on your do not disturb, so you don't get notifications in the way. It will channel more processing power to the game and de-optimize other areas of the phone, so to improve your latency during gameplay as well. So there are ways to really channel that performance and make the most of it depending on what you're doing.
Brilliant. And also it's a 5G phone. This is probably the most affordable 5G phone that you can buy at the moment for a lot of people, or it's in that ballpark anyway. It's one of the cheaper 5G phones. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
I certainly can. Yeah, it's nice to see 5G filtering down the price tiers. And this, as you've said, this is one of the cheapest 5G phones. It's not the cheapest. There are a couple out there. But in terms of being relatively widely available in Europe and India, at least, then it's nice to see 5G this. I mean, I haven't been able to test 5G because where I am hasn't been graced with 5G just yet. And I don't think
with me
either. No. So it's actual 5G performance. Well, we'll definitely try that out when we can get back to a bit more normality. And we'll definitely update the review with that. But there shouldn't be too much of an issue. In terms of connectivity in general, I've not had any issues with that. In terms of Wi-Fi and moving between Wi-Fi and 4G LTE, it's all been fine, and I've had good speeds.
Brilliant. Cool. Right, let's get on to the thing everyone really wants to know about then, price. It's a mid-range phone, as we've spoken about, but what are the exact prices you can expect? And is everyone that's watching this video right now going to be able to buy this phone? I know the answer to that, and it's a bit of a disappointment for some.
What a great looking question. Yes, the OnePlus Nord price starts at, if you're in the UK, £379. If you're in Europe, €399. If you're in India, 24,999 rupees. That's for your base model. In Europe, the base model is the 8 gig of RAM, 128 gig of storage. In India, the base model is 6 gig of RAM, 64 gig of storage.
Right.
There is also, as I've mentioned, 12 gig and 256 combination of RAM and storage. So in the UK, you're looking at £469, and in Europe, £499. Why have I not said anything about the US or other markets? Well, at the moment, it doesn't look like OnePlus has any plans to sell it officially in North America
Hmm.
or anywhere else outside of Europe, India, China, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, I think, at the moment. It could well come to more markets soon, but OnePlus hasn't confirmed anything, and it's been quite sketchy around US or North American availability.
Yeah.
It's not going to be available, and then there was reports that actually it will be available, but in a really limited beta program sort of way.
Mhm.
But it doesn't sound like it's going to be on general sale in North America, but there is a small chance that a small subset of people may be able to get a handset through some sort of thing that OnePlus runs, but it's not clear. So yeah, if you're in the UK, though, if you're in one of about 30 European countries, if you're in India, it's going to be easily available from major retailers and from the OnePlus website as well. And the official release date is August 4th. So we're not too far away from that. But OnePlus, it looks like it's going to be running some pop-up events before that as well, if you wanted to try and stake a claim to a handset earlier.
Yeah, some lockdown pop-up events, though, so you may struggle to actually attend any of those. Brilliant, thank you very much. So, last question is essentially, who would you say this phone is for? The mid-range is becoming a much more exciting place in the last 12 months or so, maybe even the last 24 months, with things like the new iPhone SE and this, and the Google Pixel 3a, and a variety of other handsets like that. Why should you buy a OnePlus Nord over that?
As you said, it's a very competitive market now, this mid-range, and actually we're spoiled for choice. We've got great quality handsets packing loads of features for, really interesting price tags, and ones that are making us maybe rethink, do we need flagship phones? Why are they so expensive? Are they value for money? Because you've got all of these handsets now around this price point, which are just doing great work. So the OnePlus Nord, would I recommend it? Yes. In short, it looks great. It works really well. It's got plenty of camera options. It might be slightly overkill in the number of camera options, but if you're into photography, there is plenty for you to play with there. The screen is bright, it's big, it's clear. As OnePlus says, it's pretty much everything you want from a phone, which is kind of a cheesy line, but it does sort of have a point. It's focused on core areas. Sure, battery life could be better. It would be nice to see wireless charging. But overall, it's a very nice phone. If you're a OnePlus fan and you've not been a fan of their price rises, then this is really going to appease you and will hopefully get you excited about the brand again. It brings OnePlus back into the heartland where it's once started, and it now seems like a place where it can play. It has now more brand recognition than it did 6 years ago.
Definitely.
So it's a really interesting place. So if you're looking for a mid-range handset, which has a bunch of flagship features, but obviously not the flagship price tag, then the Nord is a great option.
Fantastic. Right. Thank you very much, John. Don't leave yet. We're going to move on to some questions that we've had in the Facebook chat and the YouTube chat. Ooh. And I'm bringing our video producer, Matt Phillips, is going to run us through some of the questions that you've been jotting down. Thank you for all your questions so far.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. There are so many questions flying around in the chat. Some great questions.
Yes.
There's been a bit of a theme as well, like how does the OnePlus Nord compare to X phone? So I thought I'd set up a little quick fire round for you, John. So I'm going to throw a load of phones at you, and you're going to tell me which one you'd go for yourself. The OnePlus
this should
Nord.
Be interesting.
Well, yeah, we'll see. So first one then from Yusuf, OnePlus Nord versus Xiaomi Mi 10 Lite.
What up, Yusuf? I'm not sure what price difference there is in your region. I don't think the Mi Note 10 Lite is actually available in the UK at the moment.
Fair enough.
They are quite similar on a spec sheet level. However, the Nord has a slightly better chipset. It's got the 765G versus the 730 in the Xiaomi. So in terms of performance, the Nord should be slightly better, but the difference is going to be minimal. The OnePlus also offers you that 12 gig of RAM option, whereas the Mi 10 Note, that phone with a really long complicated name maxes out at 8 gig of RAM. And again, if you're a bit of a storage fiend as well, the Nord goes up to 256, where the Xiaomi only goes up to 128 gig.
Fantastic stuff. What about the Realme X3 versus the Nord?
The Realme X3, I don't know too much about the X3, but I do know a bit about the Realme X55G, which comes in just below the Nord in terms of price point with a very similar spec sheet. There's a couple of savings that they've made. For example, they use an LCD rather than an AMOLED screen, so not quite as zappy under your eyes, for example. But yeah, Realme is also an interesting brand. It's sort of a couple of years behind where OnePlus is now, but it's one of those brands that is making good quality and affordable handsets. There are a few small compromises, as I've said, so you might want to just check the reviews and read up a bit. And there is that price balance. It's cheaper, but why is it cheaper? It's not necessarily it's a bad thing because it's cheaper, but really think about what's important to you from your smartphone and what you use your phone for the most, and then base it off that.
For sure. And then we had this one from two different people, Aslan and Ha, in the YouTube chat. The Samsung A71.
So I was at the launch of the Galaxy A series, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago now, the sort of relaunch. It was in Milan and they're making a big splash. And yeah, it was Samsung basically trying to do a OnePlus. They were trying to get people excited about their mid-range proposition, which, had kept going over the years. It has, Samsung has had a full suite of phones for a long time.
Sure.
But they sort of disappeared into the background a little bit versus, the Galaxy S series and the Note series, which really take the limelight. So the A series was sort of a reinvigoration of the mid-range for Samsung, and they made a big splash of it. And they've been trialing flagship features, but on the A series first. So it's an interesting one, and it's another brand that's trying to bring flagship features to the mid-range, again, to challenge people like OnePlus. So versus the A71 and the Nord, it's a tough one. Again, very similar on paper. The Nord has a better chip set. Has a better chip set. I don't know what's going on with my words today. Again, the Samsung uses the 730. The Nord is on 765. So in terms of performance and maybe slightly more longevity there, it's just got newer tech under the hood, which should help you out. Samsung's camera proposition has always been very good. It's got a great heritage at the flagship level in terms of its camera quality. So you can expect decent photography from the A71 as well. That's got 4 cameras, a la the Nord as well. There's also a front-facing camera, 32 megapixel on the A71. So basically what I'm getting at is they're very similar. Battery life is probably a touch better on the Samsung.
Sure.
But you may prefer the look and the feel of the Nord. Again, pricing-wise, I think the Nord is cheaper than the A71, and there's not too much to choose. So again, have a think about what's important for you.
And then finally, I'll give you a difficult one. The iPhone SE versus the Pixel 3a versus the OnePlus Nord. So the SE is an interesting phone. It's something that almost is unlike Apple at the minute because it's got its suite of 11 series. They're premium phones with premium price tags, all display screens, face unlock, etc. And then, bam, you've got the iPhone SE, which is great. It's what people have been calling for, a smaller iPhone with a lower price tag, right into the mid-range, an exciting proposition, and really, again, mixes up that mid-range. It's more expensive than the Nord. Its design, you may find, is a bit old because it brings back the bezels and it brings back Touch ID button, home button under the screen in that large chunky bezel. So in terms of looks, maybe that's a look that you prefer. Maybe you miss bezels, in which case the iPhone SE is one of the few phones offering you that style. However, the Nord, that's the all-screen experience. You've got the cutout for the front-facing cameras there. You have an in-display fingerprint scanner, so it's still on the front. It's just within the screen, so you get more screen real estate there. So it's an interesting one. However, if you're an iPhone user and you just want a nice upgrade, which isn't going to cost you the earth, the iPhone SE is sort of a sensible upgrade, especially if you're currently rocking an iPhone 6, 6S, or 7. Moving to the iPhone SE is actually going to be an improvement for you, even though it's a mid-range phone and those were flagships of their time, because you're going to get the latest processor from Apple. You've got the latest software on there. So it's going to be a really nice package. You're going to get decent warranty. It will have a decent lifetime to it. And Apple phones always hold their value well. So even if you hold on to the SE for a year or so, you're going to get a pretty good price for it if you come to trade it in. The Nord, on the other hand, it's cheaper to start with, so that's always a bonus. It's technically got a bit more feature-rich about it. It looks a bit better, in my opinion. It's got a slightly nicer design. But yeah, it really comes down to what do you prefer, iPhone or Android? Fantastic stuff. And then a couple of quick fire questions then that are just about kind of specs so we can answer them nice and quick. Does it have stereo speakers from Smurfy on Instagram?
Yes, kind of. It's got a bottom firing speaker, and then it's got a speaker built into the earpiece area. They're okay. It's easy to cover up a bottom firing speaker with your hands when you're holding it in landscape. So when you're gaming, so when I'm playing PUBG, I can hardly hear someone shooting at me, which is a bit of an issue. people like Sony tend to do better with these because you get dual front facing speakers, which fire all the sound at you, harder to cover up. The speakers are fine, but I would recommend headphones.
Yeah, for sure. And then what OS is it running? From Mario on Facebook.
So it's Android 10, and then it's got OnePlus's Oxygen OS 10.5 interface laid on top of that. It pretty much looks like stock Android, but OnePlus will tell you it's got over 300 optimizations, and there's a bunch of customization options if those are your thing that you can dive into in the settings menu, allowing you to sort of personalize it a little bit more than stock Android would. But if you're familiar with Android, this won't be too much of a departure. It's not that much of a heavy UI.
Makes sense. And then jumping back to Instagram, Nitin said, ear plug not available, right? I'm guessing they mean headphone jack. But I think you mentioned this, yeah.
There is no headphone jack, and you don't get a set of headphones in the box, except if you're in which country? Take a guess. Which country will get headphones in the box, and everywhere else will miss out?
What do you reckon, James?
Have a guess.
I would assume India, because that's the place that OnePlus is really trying to push the phone.
Incorrect. So the only place where the OnePlus Nord will come with bundled headphones is France.
Why?
I don't know. That's something I'll have to go away and find out.
Fantastic stuff. And then a few people asking this question, but L Silver on Instagram, Gabrielle on Instagram as well. A little bit of confusion in the chat around the frame. Is it plastic? Is it metal? What are we dealing with?
So it's a bit of both. You've got the screen. I mean, this probably is not going to show it in the best light, but you've got the screen, and there's a thin plastic black bezel that runs around it, and then you've got a metal frame that sandwiches the device, and then you've got Gorilla Glass 5 on the back.
Makes sense. Hopefully that cleared up some of the confusion. I saw people chatting in the chat about that earlier. On YouTube from Dan, he says, do you think we need a case or screen protector?
Great question. How clumsy are you, Dan? Would be my first answer. But also, it's a slippery little sausage, this one, as are most glass-backed phones these days. It's not much grip in there, and the camera block on the back is quite chunky. It's quite the protrusion, and because it's not in the middle like it is on the 8 series here, it means if you put it back down on a surface and then you go typing on it, it wobbles because of that protrusion on the side. The good news is you get a case included in the box.
Lovely.
So that's good, and it shows off the design, and it's a relatively slim fit, but that means two things. First of all, you get some protection and you get some grip if you are someone who's a little bit more clumsy, and it still manages to show off the color and the design of the phone while giving you that protection. But also, it flattens the back, so there's no wobble. There's the camera bump is no longer an issue, so you can put it flat down and you can tap away while it's resting on a surface, and it's not going to wobble for you. Another interesting thing, and it's not something I've seen on a case for a while, especially one included in the box, is there's a little flap over the USB-C port. And again, I'm not sure how easy this is going to see, but it means that it just stops, dust and lint collecting in that port. What it does mean, though, is it's a bit trickier to plug it in at night when I'm half asleep and trying to fiddle with the cable and then trying to hold the phone, but also trying to undo the flap as I hold the cable and put it all in. It's a minor annoyance. But yeah, I was speaking to my dad actually the other day, and he has an iPhone. He was saying, my iPhone is not really charging anymore. I plug it in. Do I need a new cable? I said, try cleaning out the lightning port.
I've run into that issue, yeah.
Yeah, with what? And I said, something like a cotton bud, something very soft that's not going to scratch it, but you've probably just got a bit of dust. So he said he cleaned it out and he did get some gubbins out, and it's been charging fine ever since. So, there is especially Lightning and USB-C, they're sort of ports which are pretty open and ready to collect any sort of dust that may be knocking about. So to have a nice little flap over it might just help you in the long run.
Absolutely. And then we had a question from Power Shield on YouTube, and maybe James, you can jump in on this one as well. I'm not sure how much this matters, but we'll see. What are the privacy concerns considering OnePlus is a Chinese company? Will they be in the same boat as Huawei come a year's time or whatever?
Well,
Sorry, you go ahead, John.
no, you go. I've talked a load.
I, from my personal standpoint, I don't see them being in the same boat as Huawei this in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
The Huawei ban in the US has been a particularly political issue with that company, and that has been the restrictions that they've then been put under, so they're no longer able to use Google mobile services apps. That's a very complicated topic that we can't really. But then again, we couldn't predict that happening.
Sure.
Over a year ago either, so I don't think we're in the place to be able to predict that. So far, in our expert opinion, there doesn't seem to be any privacy issues, but we're also not really the place to comment on that either, I would say. Would you agree, John?
Yeah, it's a tricky one and something which is sort of out of our wheelhouse because, the legal complexities of it and the political complexities of it are difficult to monitor. There's nothing suggesting at the moment that any other Chinese phone manufacturer is under threat at the minute, and there are plenty of Chinese phone manufacturers. I mean, we've mentioned some of them: Realme, Xiaomi, OnePlus today. So at the moment, there doesn't seem to be an issue, but we can't provide any guarantees.
Fantastic stuff. So Johnny Ban on Facebook says, what are the memory and color options? So I think we chatted about the memory options. Hopefully you got that answered for you, Johnny. But color options, I don't think we chatted about. All right, go for it, man. Go for it.
I'll recap. So if you're in Europe, then your entry-level device is 8 gig of RAM and 128 gigabyte of storage, or you can opt for 12 gig of RAM and 256 gigabyte of storage. If you're in India, there's actually a third option available there, which is 6 gig of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage. It comes in two colors: grey onyx, which is a grey silvery, and blue marble, which is the one I have here, and it's the color I prefer, but I'm a big fan of loud, bright colors, so this suits my personality quite nicely. But yeah, there's a grey onyx for those who maybe don't want to be quite so garish.
Fantastic stuff. And then this one came up a couple of times as well, but I didn't mention it in the verses. Is the Nord a viable option, or should I go for the 7T? It's a little bit more expensive, but still. That's from
a great question.
I'm going to butcher your name if I try and say it, but Patel in the YouTube chat. Thank you very much.
Cool. The good thing about the 7T is that it has come down in price, and as you said, it's now only slightly more expensive than the Nord, and you're technically getting a better phone in terms of chipset. You're getting an 800 series Snapdragon versus a 700 series in the Nord. It's a nice looking device. It's very powerful. It works well. However, on the flip side, the Nord, it's 8 months, 9 months, 10 months almost newer. And from launch day, so from August 4th, OnePlus guarantees it will get a minimum of 2 major Android software updates. It will get major Android software updates for 2 years from August 4th this year, which means the Nord will easily get Android 11 and Android 12, which will likely arrive at the end of 2021. So it gives you a good bit of future proofing. While a similar guarantee is made with the 7T, obviously that launched 8-9 months ago. So you're slightly behind, which means that its support may run out quicker than the Nord. So if you're looking for a phone that's going to give you a bit more longevity, 2 years minimum of software updates, 3 years minimum of security updates on the Nord from date of launch, then you've got better long-term security. However, if you're looking to change your phone every sort of 18 months to 2 years, then maybe you'd go for the 7T just to have that little bit of extra power under the hood if you're into gaming or you do like a lot of photography editing. However, for more casual users, the Nord is probably going to suffice.
Fantastic stuff. Last couple of questions then, and speaking of photography, look at that segue. Robert on Facebook says, what is the night mode on the camera like? Is it anywhere near as good as the Google phones?
Cool. So I mentioned this briefly earlier, but Nightscape is good depending on your nighttime environment. You go out, I've done some late night walks, you find an area. So I went to sort of a church and it had some lighting on it. There was like a light above the door and a couple of lights in the graveyard. Nothing too crazy, but there were light sources for the camera to draw on. And from that, it was able to give me a really nice image, much clearer, much exposed than from the main camera without night mode. However, you go somewhere much darker. I managed to find a car wash on the side of a road with maybe one street lamp, but not in shot and further up the road. So the light source was minimal, and Nightscape struggled a bit more to do anything more than the main camera could with just plain HDR. Compared to sort of Google's pixel algorithms, then it's not quite as good as that. The Google stuff is very clever, and it's almost all software based because it does it through a single camera as well, which makes it even more impressive. So if you're looking for like some of the best night mode action, then the Google Pixel, or even the Huawei on the P30 and the P40s, their night modes are also very good. Again, these are flagship phones with flagship price tags. The Nord isn't, so yeah, you're not going to get the same level, but it does make a difference, Nightscape versus the standard camera mode. So yeah, worth playing with. Sure,
and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your full written review on site, you've got some camera comparisons, right? So definitely worth going and checking out TechRadar.com if you want to see those sort of camera comparisons side by side there. And then final question then that we'll close out on, and James, I think you can jump in on this one as well. Is the OnePlus future-proof enough? Like, can I use it for 5 years and not expect to need to upgrade? So maybe chat a little bit about what's sort of on the horizon, what might be coming out, and whether or not you think this phone is sort of a good investment, I guess, long term.
I think that question is not specifically about the Nord. If you're asking for a phone that can work for 5 more years, I think a lot of people are used to upgrading their phones in a two yearly cycle at the moment. The OnePlus Nord is probably a good place to go if you are looking for a phone that's going to last that amount of time. There is, as John has said, there is no guarantee that you're going to keep getting software updates after 2 years. You will get guaranteed 2 years of software updates and 3 years of security updates. But then that's pretty much across the board with most handsets, and even you can even get less with some Android phones as well. If you are looking for a device that's probably going to last that amount of time, maybe look at the iPhone. The iPhones are sometimes a little bit better supported, and for example, the 2016 iPhone SE is still getting regular iOS 13 updates at the moment, and I'm pretty sure it still gets iOS 14 when that launches later this year. So, if that's something you're really concerned about, maybe look towards that. And even the new iPhone SE probably is a great option for that, because we would expect that to be supported for a little bit longer as well.
However, the Nord also is 5G. No iPhone at the moment supports 5G. So when that new network does eventually hit wherever you're living, again, as we've said, it hasn't hit us quite yet, unfortunately. But when it does, if you do have the Nord, then you know that your phone will be able to take advantage of the best network speed straight away. If you were to buy an iPhone, for example, this year, even if it was an old one or a new one, in 2 years' time and 5G arrives wherever you live, you won't be able to take advantage of those 5G speeds because you've got a phone that doesn't support it. So that's an extra bit of longevity with the Nord, is that it's got that 5G support plus the software and the security update guarantees.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we have
stuff.
Have to wait for September to see if Apple do a 5G iPhone. But sorry, Matt, go ahead.
I think it's relatively likely, right?
Yeah, pretty certain.
There is one more question just come in from Emily on Facebook, so I know I said it would be the last question, but we'll do one more. Would this be an upgrade from the OnePlus S? Is that S or 5? Or will I be disappointed? Previously had OnePlus 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5. So, okay. Would it be an upgrade from the OnePlus 5?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Simple there we go. Nice and easy for you, Emily.
You definitely notice the difference in terms of performance, design, camera ability, everything. It's absolutely an upgrade.
Fantastic stuff. Well, guys, thanks for joining us in the chat. You've been awesome, and we've had so many questions. Really appreciate it. Live streams are relatively new for us, but clearly you guys have enjoyed this, or at least I hope you have. So please do consider subscribing, following us on Facebook, subscribing on YouTube, hitting that bell, and you can join us for our next live stream, which in fact will be very soon. Tonight we are live streaming. Myself, James, Adam from the site, and Tom from the site. We are live streaming Warzone, trying to get them W's tonight. I think it starts at 8 p.m, I want to say.
I'm so sorry, Matt. I'm so sorry that you're going to have to carry me.
Yeah, my back's going to be sore tomorrow. But if you fancy tuning in and cheering us on, we'd really appreciate that. But until next time, I guess, remember to go to TechRadar.com and you can read John's full review and see those camera comparisons with checking out. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Peace.
Bye-bye.